Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit like, follow, or subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on. You can also check out my work at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com, for exclusive hard rock and heavy metal interviews, live show coverage, album reviews, and more. My guest for episode 198 is rock violinist NINA DIGREGORIO. You've probably seen the viral video of her cover of Eddie Van Halen's Eruption solo from the first Van Halen album. In addition to that, she is a member of the Femmes of Rock, which is a string quartet that covers rock songs from all eras. And here's NINA DIGREGORIO to tell you more about it. The internet is abuzz with your cover of Eddie Van Halen's Eruption on the violin. I would imagine that putting this together was no easy task and that a lot of preparation had to go into pulling this off.
Definitely. It was not even a matter of months, but probably a matter of years to prepare for doing this correctly, because I didn't want to just cover it on the violin as a violin would do it. I wanted to cover it on the violin, but I wanted to sound like Eddie. So I wanted to do it in the correct octave. I wanted to use the correct effects, and I wanted to learn finger tapping on the violin, which was no easy feat.
Did you have to have a special violin made to be able to do this?
Yes, at the time when I first started learning Eruption a few years ago, I only had access to a 5-string fretless electric violin, and I quickly learned that I would have to take things up an octave to be able to play them. I didn't have enough strings to have the range to do it, and also there's no way you're doing finger tapping on a fretless instrument. I really wanted to see if having frets would change that. And when I ordered the instrument, the 7-string fretted electric violin, I wasn't even sure that you could do tapping even with the frets. So it was kind of a leap of faith to see if it was possible. And it took a long time to get the correct chain of effects, to figure things out by trial and error. Every time you would solve one problem, another 3 would come up, because this instrument wasn't really designed to do what a guitar can do. So it took a lot of creative work to make it happen.
So did you have, I used to play some guitar, so did you have to have some sort of humbucker put in there to kind of pick up the vibration from the finger tapping, or how did it end up working out?
No, the pickup is in the bridge. It's a Barbera pickup bridge inside my Viper violin. And so I didn't alter the pickups at all, but I did have to create an effect chain that the strings are much higher tension. They're much higher off of the fingerboard, and they're a lot shorter than guitar strings. So just if you try and do tapping on a guitar and you don't plug the guitar in, you can still make noise doing it. You'll still hear the notes. On a violin, you're not going to hear anything trying to do it at all. So trying to get it to speak without having it sound like a noisy train wreck was a very difficult and meticulous process.
Well, it seemed like that the video itself was quite the production in addition to your playing. Do you want to talk a little bit about putting that together?
Sure. I usually film my covers just from my home studio here, which a lot of the things on my page you can see with the guitars in the background here. But this was such an epic feat to learn, and it took so long. I feel like it needed a video to do it justice, just like the learning process. So one of my wardrobe ladies here in Las Vegas, excuse me, I'm getting over bronchitis for 3 months now, and it just doesn't want to go away. She custom made the Eddie Van Halen outfit. I kind of gave her like a really terrible sketch of something I had in mind, and then she turned it into a reality, which was really cool. And then my husband Brody, he mixed and mastered the audio. He also brought in and programmed the lasers and directed the lighting and things like that for the video. And he is a show producer, so he's really great at all of the show elements of everything. And then Patrick Rivera, a local videographer, photographer in Las Vegas, shot the footage for us, and we filmed it at the Smith Center, which is kind of like the Carnegie Hall of Las Vegas. It's a beautiful, huge concert hall, and it's really the classiest place in town. So I'm glad that we did it there.
Were you surprised at the overwhelmingly responsive feedback that you got from this video?
I knew that it would be big just because it wasn't really done yet. Like, you can't go find a million recordings of a violinist covering it note for note exactly with the tapping. There's two of us, I think, that have done the finger tapping. So just because of the scarcity of it, I knew that it would get some attention, but I wasn't expecting it to get the attention from like larger news circuits as it did. I even think someone sent me an article from Yahoo Entertainment and some larger, news segments, and the Van Halen news desk featured it, and Classic Rock magazine featured it. So, some of those larger outlets. And then, of course, being recognized by Michael Anthony from Van Halen, he commented on the video. That's, he was one of the original guys. So that's a big compliment coming from him as well.
Now, of course, when it comes to the internet and social media, you'll also get your negative reactions to something like this. Like people claim that you sped up the footage or you slowed down the footage or something like that. But I mean, that comes with the territory of social media postings.
Definitely. And, the thing is, you can always tell if somebody is fake or not. And I understand people thinking everything is fake because the world of technology and AI as it is, it's really hard to tell. But sometimes people are lazy. Like a simple Google search will tell you a lot. Like if you Google my name, you'll see that I'm out on live tour dates all the time. People buy tickets to those shows. 1,000 people sit in those seats and watch me do these things every single week. So, if you're finding these sorts of things and then you find, that, oh, I'm a Yamaha artist. Here's my bio. I've played with these different famous people on stage. I've been on these recordings. Like it's easy to kind of say, okay, maybe this is actually a real musician and not just a fake person. But a lot of people don't do that. But I've since posted, a little clip of sound check doing Eruption, and I just posted a live video from one of our shows last week as well. So it's a fan footage shot by a cell phone on my page. So hopefully following up the real video with all of these little live footage clips, people realize that I'm not an AI hologram.
So is Michael Anthony the only one in the Van Halen camp that you've heard from thus far?
I haven't heard it from anyone else from the Van Halen camp, but every time I post a video that gets a lot of traction, I'll hear from sometimes the original artists. I'll hear from sometimes actors or actresses or pro athletes will like and comment on my videos. So they've spanned quite a reach of people who have seen the various videos that I've put out there now.
Have you ever had the chance to meet Eddie Van Halen before he passed?
I did not. Unfortunately, a lot of my favorite guitar players and a lot of favorite musicians were gone before I had a chance to see them live or meet them. I've been lucky enough to play with some of them. I performed with Cheap Trick, and I also got to perform with Deep Purple. And being an old rocker like I am, those were some of my favorite gigs.
Now, I would imagine you started playing the violin when you were younger and probably grade school or high school, or did you start playing the guitar and transfer over to the violin?
Actually, I started on piano at age 6, took piano lessons for a few years, so I could already read music and have a bass for that by the time I started school orchestra. At 9 years old, they made us choose an instrument for either band or orchestra in school, and I wanted to play the saxophone because I was really into old school rock and roll, like 50s type music. The band director said, "You're too small. You'll never be able to carry it to the bus. Try violin instead. It's lighter." So I was like, okay. And that's really how I started. And then when I was I'd say about 13 years old, my dad had an acoustic guitar at home and some fake books, with chords. And I would look at the little chords and see where to put my fingers and kind of self-taught myself guitar chords. I can't play anything like major, like crazy on guitar, but I can play enough guitar to learn songs on guitar and to record some of the parts for my backing tracks that I use in my violin solo videos. So I kind of self-taught guitar around 13, but like never played professionally or anything like that. And then I self-taught bass guitar in my early 20s and joined a band, an all request band, and learned a ton of songs on bass. So I would say I'm probably a better bass player than a guitar player just because I have a lot more live experience doing that.
Was there something that inspired you to take the violin and kind of turn it into this rock instrument that you have?
Yes, I remember the exact moment actually when I was probably about 13 years old. My dad was watching a documentary about Woodstock, the original Woodstock. I managed to walk in the living room right when Jimi Hendrix was playing the Star Spangled Banner, his version of it. And I was like, how is he making those sounds? This is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. I need to figure out how to do that on my instrument. And I had purchased like a cheap electric violin on eBay, and I next day I plugged it into my dad's Marshall amp and messed with all the settings on it. And then my parents came home from work, and there I played the Star Spangled Banner Jimi Hendrix style, and they were like, "Oh boy, I guess this is happening now."
Now, you've done a lot of other rock and roll covers throughout your career, in addition to the Eddie Van Halen one. Do you require different types of violins to do these different songs?
Yes, I have. Well, I don't know if you can see a few of them back there. I did a video where I demonstrated all of the different violins I own, and there was, I don't know, probably like 30 of them actually at this point. But I have violins ranging from really good classical acoustic, that acoustic one right there that you see, that's from 1752, Mittenwald, Germany. It's like my really good classical violin that when I was getting my master's degree, I played all of my repertoire on that. And then I own multiple electric violins, some 4-string, some 5-string fretless. And I really enjoy covering David Gilmour solos on the fretless violin. I feel like I can make them way gooier. Even though sliding is possible on the fretted instruments, it's easier to do on the fretless. And then I have 2 fretted violins. I have a 6-string and a 7-string fretted Viper violin. And I use those when I need the extended range of guitar solos. And also when I'm trying to do guitar specific techniques, it's easier to do power chords, pinch harmonics, and of course, tapping with the frets on the violin.
So the best way to see you play Eruption live is with your touring group, the Femmes of Rock, correct?
That's right. We're touring, and we have a lot of dates coming up in June, actually, this year. And we're always adding new cities and venues. And it's a really unique, probably never before seen kind of arrangements of favorite classic rock and prog artists like Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Rush, Van Halen, Queen, that sort of stuff. And we sing and we play electric violins. We also have a 3-piece backing band and video multimedia experience that happens during the show. So it's really a unique show, and that's the best way to see me live right now. It's the only place that I'm currently touring with.
Are there different versions of Femmes of Rock? Because I noticed the ones that you promote are mostly East Coast dates. Yeah, you got something going on in Vegas, but it looks like you guys are covering East Coast mainly.
That's because that's where all the people that I know happen to be. So, I mean, it's not a matter of we don't like to play on the West Coast. It's just that I have more connections with venues on the East Coast. I'm originally from Buffalo, and I don't know if that plays into it, but we have a lot of people that buy tickets for our shows up through New England, on the East Coast. Also in the Chicago area, we go there and we do pretty well in Wisconsin and Chicago. Vegas does well. We do a Vegas show once a year. I don't really have any venues in Southern California yet, or a lot of places out west. So it's just a matter of having a venue present an offer letter to us that makes sense. It's tough. We have 8 people that travel with us. So the expenses are fairly high. And if they've never heard of me, it's a bit of a leap of faith. And you have to really work hand in hand with the marketing department for something like this. I'm not traditionally famous in the sense that I have radio hits and a big record label behind me. But the show has built organically and requires a specific social media kind of presentation, because that's what my audience is. I put out these videos on social media. They get millions of views. I have a lot of followers on social media, but being able to translate that same kind of promo to a live venue is really important. So the ones that work hand in hand with us on that, we sell tickets to. We're doing about 1,000 seats, I would say, something like that. Those types of venues.
My apologies to you and your Buffalo Bills, being from the Massachusetts, New England Patriots country over here. I mean, we were just like you guys in the 80s, and maybe it'll take 30, 40 years for the Buffalo to turn it around.
Well, we just played a show in Rhode Island, and everybody there is a Patriots fan. But we've built this rapport over the years where I make fun of them and they make fun of me, and it's okay. And I actually told them this year, we have to work together this year, because Patriots fans and Bills fans can align in not wanting Patrick Mahomes to be the GOAT. Neither one of us want that. So it might take you guys pulling for Josh Allen for a few years to knock him off of his throne, because you guys aren't going to do it for a few years. I mean, let's be honest. So.
Not at all. So how did the Femmes of Rock first form?
The concept started when I was 12 or 13 years old, and I would write arrangements of my favorite rock tunes for string quartet. And I put together a little group of my friends in school, and we would play weddings and restaurants in the local Buffalo area. And I would handwrite the charts on paper, and we'd play Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin and, you know, Pink Floyd and The Who and stuff like that. And then when I moved to Las Vegas, I got a job playing with Wayne Newton and his orchestra. And I got a Yamaha sponsorship, so I was able to get a full quartet of electric instruments at that point. And I met other performers in the shows on the Las Vegas Strip who were roughly the same age as me. And we all kind of wanted to do something that featured the strings, because the strings are always the backing thing. And whenever there's a budget cut, you're the first thing to go. Like, they never cut the drummer, but they'll cut the strings, you know, first. So we're like, we want to be the stars of the show. We're going to get out of the pit orchestra and put ourselves up there as the main entertainment. So we started Bella Electric Strings, which I still have. It's a corporate entertainment group. It's electric strings to backing tracks. Could be a soloist, could be a trio, could be a quartet. And we played mostly all private corporate events in Vegas. I don't perform in that group anymore. I just book and manage it because it became too much to do everything. But at some point when I was performing in that group, a guy came to one of our performances and said that he owned a theater and asked if we could do a ticketed performance, a stage show to it. And of course I said yes. And then I didn't have a stage show, but I wrote it at that point. I had about a year to make it happen. And that show became the Femmes of Rock show. It was like an elevated, production show version of the Bella Electric Strings. And from there, we just kept adding more things and more production, and started doing tour dates. And eventually we changed the name from the Bella Electric Strings to the Femmes of Rock to distinguish between the corporate act and the touring show. So it was kind of something that evolved over time. But it really kind of happened just by fate like that.
So out of all these shows that you've played so far, is there a particular performance that stands out in your mind as one of your favorites?
There are definitely certain venues where we've really, formed a nice relationship with the people who come to the show, the people who work at the venue. In Vegas, the Smith Center is our home. We love everybody there who works there and all of the people who come to our shows there. We love the Stadium Theater in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. We love the Vixen in McHenry, Illinois. These are people who have put their trust in us since the beginning, and we've been going back year after year. And we always try and add something new and different every time. And the crews are very nice to us. It's like coming home. Sometimes you go places and the crew's just like, yep, what time is it? I'm out of here. You lift that case yourself. I'm not authorized to do that, and so you go to those kind of venues and you're like, oh, God. But some of the venues, like I said, they treat us like family, and we really enjoy those shows.
Have you had any comically disastrous shows?
None where the entire show has been a disaster, because we always have a way to save face somehow. But we have had situations where gear goes down, there's problems, somebody gets sick in the middle of a show or something like that. I think that the things that happen that go wrong, we manage to save face pretty quickly. Oftentimes, if it's like a computer or a gear kind of problem, I'll just pull out the stand-up comedy for 2 or 3 minutes until they fix the problem. I'll talk to the crowd or kind of divert the attention away. Sometimes it's my gear that has the problem. Like the very first time I did Eruption live, my pedal had a bunch of feedback, and the guitar player stepped in and covered for me so that I could get the sound out of there. The second time I did it, I tweaked the sound and it was great. There was no feedback at all. But the first time it happens, you're working out the bugs when you do this stuff on a large PA versus on your studio recording, So, I don't think we've had any complete disaster shows. Maybe the worst was one we actually did outdoors in Las Vegas, and it was June. It was like 120 degrees outside, and all of our gear fried. Like the in-ear monitors fried, the computer fried. So like we could barely run anything. It was like hanging on the fritz of even happening. Luckily, we were just an opening act for that show, and we didn't have to do a full 90 minutes. So the torture was over fairly quickly. But those situations, you can't control the elements. What else can you do?
Is the release of your performance of Eruption a sign that you are dipping your toe into doing some solo work?
Yeah, I think that kind of started happening when I started putting these videos out during COVID. I had never done that before. I just toured with the show. But during COVID, when we were unable to tour, I took the solos that I did live in the show and I cut them into short segments and started a TikTok page and started posting them on social media. I didn't really expect that they would gain the traction that they had, but doing that has helped the ticket sales for our live show. So I kept doing them. Even after we were allowed to tour again, I still kept making the videos. But yeah, I mean, the Femmes of Rock, like I said, it's a production show and it's a lot of cover music. It's not really something to showcase my individual talents. We feature everyone in the band in the show. Yeah, I do solos in the show, but we feature everybody in a different way who performs in the show. And I have a bunch of original ideas and I'd like to get a solo album out next. And I think after Eruption, I was kind of like, well, that's the holy grail of things for me to do. So what comes next? And I think the only logical thing to come next is a solo album, an original album. So I'll be working on that in the upcoming months.
Are you still working with recording artists and other live performers? I know you appeared on Beyonce's I Am Yours live DVD. You were a soloist in Tony Braxton's Las Vegas residency. You appeared on a couple of other music recordings as well.
I made a conscious decision when I started the Femmes of Rock show to start not doing those kind of gigs anymore, because although they look great on your resume, when the show ends or when the tour ends, you're in the same spot that you were before, but you're just older. So all the things that you want to do with your own career have just pushed back and made you a couple years older in that sense. And I don't regret doing those things for as long as I did, because every show that I played in or every artist I worked with, I learned something from. Even the ones that don't play rock music, which is what I play now, I still learned something from the show, whether it be how to produce a show, whether it be work ethic, whether it be how to front a show and be a good front person. You know, I sat behind Wayne Newton and I watched him front a show and the people loved him. You know, they just loved him. So you can't say I didn't learn something from watching Wayne Newton front a show for all those years. So I think that it was a necessary part of my growth. But I think at the point where I decided to do my own thing, if I was trying to cram too many things into it, we wouldn't be where we are now. It would be 10 steps behind because I just wouldn't have the time to have taken it this far at this point. But not to say that in my solo career, if I had the opportunity to work with one of my favorite people, and that being the people that I cover their work in my videos, that I wouldn't collaborate songwriting or producing or for a live show or something like that. But it has to be the right situation at this point.
The Femmes of Rock released an EP back in 2018. Are there any plans for a follow-up?
Yes, we're actually we're waiting to sell out our last batch of the ones that we have now, and at that point we're going to get a new one going, because I think everyone who's come to our shows has purchased the old one at this point.
Is there another challenging guitar solo song that you are currently looking to tackle?
I have a couple things in mind for covers, you know, outside of the original project that I want to work on. Obviously, I learned a lot by covering a few Eddie Van Halen solos, and there's a lot more in his repertoire that I would love to figure out how to translate to violin. So I would say you could definitely expect more of that in the future. And the song that made me a Rush fan that I heard in college for the first time, La Villa Strangiato, contains one of my absolute favorite guitar solos of all time. And I love covering Rush because I get to learn the bass guitar part as well as the guitar part on violin. So it's extra challenging for me. So that will happen at some point in the future as well.
If I could make a suggestion, the solo section to Europe's Final Countdown would certainly be a challenging solo on the violin.
Absolutely. Yeah, I take that into account. People tell me all the time, I'd love to see you do this. I'd love to see you do that. Most of the time I've heard this stuff. Sometimes I haven't. So it's always interesting to get other opinions of what they think will work on the violin.
Well, Nina, those are all the questions I have for you today. Eruption is out now on social media everywhere. You're currently touring with the Femmes of Rock, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast to tell me more about all of that.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to your Patriots, but not that good of luck.
Right back at you. Once again, I want to thank Nina DiGregorio for coming on the Rock is George podcast. be sure to check out her viral video of Eddie Van Halen's Eruption on all social media right now. You can also catch her with the Femmes of Rock, currently on tour. For all things Nina DiGregorio, head over to her official Facebook page /Nina M. DiGregorio. I also want to thank Michael Licata of Licata Productions for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. Discover your next favorite artist on the Rock is George podcast.